Stories of ghosts, haunted places, and demons are among literature's oldest traditions. These stories were first told around campfires by ancient men. Death was a constant in their violent, uncharted world. They used these stories to cope with constant tragedy. Our primitive ancestors grasped for reason and purpose through the idea that this world was only a part of a greater landscape still to be discovered, beyond the veil. We're still telling those stories today. Right out of the gate, we've started 2020 with 2 movies about ghosts. The first, Ghost Stories, was launched by Netflix on January 1st, an anthology of 4 stories from 4 Indian directors who had previously come together for Lust Stories, another anthology that pushed the boundaries of Indian cinema. The second, released a day later in U.S. theaters, was The Grudge, the 4th American film in the saga that began as Ju-on on Japanese television in the year 2000. It's the 13th installment in this worldwide franchise, if you're keeping track. The 2 movies could not be more different. Ghost Stories is a quartet of stories all from very different traditions. The first is an M.R. James-inspired tale, equally balancing scariness and sadness in the best English tradition. The second is an extreme, disturbing horror vignette. The third, a tongue-in-cheek political satire with a punk rock streak. The final is a social melodrama about the widening generation gap in modern India. The first 3 are, frankly, as good as the genre gets. Every genre fan needs to watch these. The second story is as transgressive as Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse, but with far darker intentions. I'd compare it with Fruit Shan's dumpling segment from 3 Extremes. Even the 4th chapter, which I'd easily say is the weakest, is thoughtful and well made. All 4 filmmakers obviously respect their audience. Scenes are allowed to develop. The architecture of the spaces where these stories take place are allowed to become characters, as they should. There's no music videos, Steven Seagal fight scene cutting here. The scenes are allowed to breathe without overly being edited to pieces. The audience is allowed time to really feel. The Grudge is exactly the opposite. If you've seen any of the previous movies or any of the Japanese ghost stories or movies inspired by Japanese ghost stories or television commercials that borrow imagery from Japanese ghost movies, then you've seen this all before, and you've seen it better before. The biggest shock is how poorly made the movie is. The Ju-on films drew their biggest strength from their jigsaw puzzle narratives. This film attempts something like that, but without purpose or reason, and it doesn't work. There's no sense of timelessness and eternal dread. In fact, the movie's never even scary. This time it relies on jump scares, but even there it feels unnaturally half-hearted. None of the characters are compelling because none of their personal dramas ever feel genuine, and a few of the performances here are unbelievably bad. It's unimaginable how the production team felt that any of this was good enough for their movie, or that they were comfortable enough charging people to see this in the shape it's in. Grudge 2020 feels like a movie made to hold on to rights. That may be the case or might not be the case, but that's the impression I got. Slapdash and crude, this isn't fast food horror. This is the scraps stolen out of the dumpster behind the fast food restaurant. The verdict? Well, I'd give Ghost Stories an A-. It's available on Netflix in both dubbed and subbed versions. It's easy to get, and it's really worth your time. We're obviously only a few days in, but this is 2020's best film so far. And it's better than most of what came out last year as well. Grudge, it gets a D. Don't bother. It's not worth the strain on your eyes, your wallet, or dealing with the inevitable migraine that's going to follow this movie. Ghost Stories haunts. The Grudge only annoys.